everyone. Welcome to the Storied Way Perspective, a podcast that takes you on a journey, an exploration, an investigation, and a discovery towards how is storytelling shaping our world today. My name is Rituparna Ghosh. I'm your host and your co-traveler on this journey. We are recording this episode on World Heritage Day, and it's the perfect opportunity to explore the relationship between heritage and storytelling. After all, what is heritage if not the stories we carry forward across generations, across borders, across time? In this episode, we explore how storytelling shapes our understanding of heritage, not just as something that we inherit, but as something that we participate in. On the show today, we have Nitika Arora, co founder of Darwesh Heritage Walks. We couldn't have celebrated Heritage Day better than this. Founded in 2013, the Darwesh Heritage Walks has been bringing the city alive through immersive storytelling, intimate betaks, and creative trails that explore the lesser known side of Delhi. Led by passionate storytellers and artists, each walk is carefully crafted experience blending history, local traditions, performance, and community voices. From dusty bylanes to forgotten monuments, Darwesh guides you through the hidden heart of the city, not just to see, but to feel, remember, and belong. Nitika Arora, with her background in theatre and acting, is the chief curator, designer, and storyteller at Darwesh. She specializes in bringing performative elements like storytelling, poetry, dramatic readings of excerpts in the walks she curates. While Darwesh looks at the lesser known side of Delhi, India's capital, Nitika is also intrigued by the themes that go beyond monuments. She uses what Darwesh calls the paradigm of discover, design, embellish, perform. And we are here to talk more about that. Welcome to the podcast, Nitika. Wishing you and Darwesh a very happy World Heritage Day.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ritu. And it's such a pleasure to be on this podcast with you, having this opportunity to share about our work with people at large, um, what we've been doing for the past 12 years now, I think,
Mhm.
more than 12 years. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And your organization, Darwesh, and mine, your story bag, started around the same time. That's how you and I became friends to start with, because we were very new in the city as far as storytelling and storytellers are concerned. And there was this whole conversation about how do we get people excited about listening to stories, of stepping out of their homes and experiencing stories in a new place or a familiar place, or whether through curated experiences, or at the same time have conversations around how stories impact our life. And I think both our organizations have been doing it in its unique ways in the city, and that's what is the power of, I think, storytelling, that we coexist and we're each shaping how people experience the city. So let's go start with that question. From the Darwesh point of view, how do you describe heritage? It's World Heritage Day, so I thought that's the first question I should ask you. How does Darwesh describe or interpret the word heritage?
Uh, I feel it's for us, it's first of all, of course, the monuments, which are, you know, all around the city of Delhi, spread across, known, unknown, lesser known. But in addition to this very tangible heritage, we've also tried to focus on the intangible side of heritage, where we look at the culture of the city, the different traditions associated with the city, and the different communities that inhabit the city of Delhi. And so both the sides, whether it is connected to monument sites or otherwise looking at the larger, um, culture of the city, or for that matter, even softer aspects connected to literature and poetry. For us, when we do these heritage walks through the medium of storytelling, our focus is that we are able to sort of blur the lines between tangible and intangible aspects of heritage and try to bring all of it together to make it as a comprehensive and, if I may use the word, wholesome experience for our audience when they are walking around the city and trying to explore it at different levels or different layers. Yeah.
No, yeah, that's a one. I go back to that word of tangible and intangible. To the layman, the one who's perhaps an outsider in the city or somebody who's in the city, we pass by these massive monuments, let's call them monuments, hidden in the bylanes or very visible, around which the city is sort of grown, and we navigate those roads. But at the same time, no, let's say, limiting heritage to a monument, to a site, to something that exists and reminds us that this is our heritage, this is our background, this is what the culture of our country is, of our city is. But all the intangible things like the food, the flavor, the community, the music, the literature, why is that softer part of heritage overlooked? Why is that not considered heritage for most people?
Uh, I think here, if anything has to be changed, then I think it has to be a change of the mindset, and also the way we, while growing up as students in this country, are oriented vis-a-vis our culture and our heritage. Because at least as far as schooling and even college education of my generation goes, I still remember that whenever there was a mention of heritage, the first thing that came to our mind was the monuments. Uh, but I think with the present style of schooling and education, which is far more experiential, uh, at least the schools that we've been engaging with in the past 10 years or so, they are more focused on experiential learning, experiential education. I think they have still made a lot of effort to expand this definition of heritage for their students. So I think it's more to do with the mindset and the orientation. Once efforts are made to change that, especially from the level of school education, I think for a lay person, the definition of heritage will automatically, over a period of time, expand to include a lot of other aspects, as you rightly said, music and literature and poetry, uh, even artworks, या किसी particular community का कोई ऐसा ट्रेडिशनल उनका चीजें हैं जो वो अपने हाथ से बनाते हैं, whether it's fulkari in Punjab or Madhubani paintings from Bihar, or for that matter chhau from you know uh, parts of Eastern India, या कथकली डांस फॉर्म है, तो अलग अलग चीजों को उस डेफिनेशन के अंदर लाना और एक क्रॉस डिसिप्लिनरी कनेक्शंस बनाना, वो आई थिंक कहीं पास में थोड़ा मिसिंग रहा है. But I think a lot of effort is actually being made by the government, by the educational institutions and individuals also, to kind of club them together, uh, you know, and make those connections in the minds of our young generation, so that when they are talking about heritage, automatically they don't look at this one very narrow aspect of a building or a structure, but then try to get into various aspects connected with that particular time or place or phase in our history.
Right. Well, let's go back to the origin of Darwesh. It's a 12-year-old organization. Uh, it started with you and two other members. So how did Darwesh happen? What was your focus when you got together to start the organization? Why heritage? Why culture? Why walks? And why performative walks? I mean, one can go incrementally into saying that your origin story is attached to the identities of the founders, and of course where you saw the gap in your city. So let's go back and start with that origin story.
Uh, Darwesh started in 2013, and interestingly, at that time, I was not a part of it. It was initiated by one of the co-founders, Yuvika Singh, and I actually give a lot of credit to her that today I have this platform to share stories and also to kind of continue to polish my own skill set as a storyteller and as a historical storyteller. The credit for kind of creating this platform goes to her. She began it in 2013. As far as I know, she gave up her well-paid, lucrative job in the development sector and decided that, because I feel somehow over the years that I've known her, she's a hardcore storyteller at heart. That's also how I define myself. And so she began this organization. And then in 2014, I was introduced to her through a common friend. And then I introduced her to the third member in the organization, third co-founder, which is Madhvi Menon. And so all three of us came together. She had already begun doing these heritage walks across several monuments of Delhi. And the moment I met her, through our conversations, I realized that her focus was more on the lesser known monuments, and also monuments which were focused on women's histories. So we'll come to that a little later as we talk more about this. But when I joined her more like a performer. So I have a background in theatre making and acting, and I formally trained in that. And I've worked with several theatre groups and directors in Delhi and in Mumbai. And I had few ideas in my mind. The first conversation we had was that, history sort of lends itself to drama. आखिर है क्या है तो कहानियां ही. And so I was like, why don't you try to take up this interesting like idea as an experiment, that you are leading your heritage walk and then I am coming in between as a performer, as a historical character which is connected with that monument, which inhabited that monument at some time back in the medieval history, and I perform few snippets from their life. And initially, I don't know how open she was to the idea. Thoda sa she was apprehensive. But then she said, "Chalo, try karte hain. Try karne mein kya jata hai."
So these were the
And
works
so
that you had in, sorry to interrupt, these were the works that you had in Red Fort, if I remember, right?
Red Fort came in a little later.
Okay.
Because we didn't have permission, because it was a very heavily guarded monument, very heavy on the radar of Government of India and the tourists. So we decided, okay, let's do it in Roshanara Bagh, the Baradari, where Roshanara Jahanara's younger daughter is buried over there. So we were doing a walk on her plus her sister Jahanara. So we decided, let's dramatize and bring certain aspects of their lives in the form of a performance. So while Yuvika would be leading the walk, I and Madhavi would be performing snippets from their lives. And also, I think the idea was कि कैसे in historical spaces को, a lot of which were lying dormant for many years, especially because they were lesser known, non-ticketed, not on the radar of a regular tourist. So how do we bring such spaces alive and make the whole experience very visceral for our audience, and also take the idea of history beyond chalk and talk, especially for our students community, and also to make the whole experience more, what should I say, more engrossing for our audience. तो वो एक आइडिया के साथ हमने शुरुआत की. So we sat down, we researched, we read a lot of important historical documents by renowned historians about these women. Luckily, at that time, a lot of books were coming out which were specifically talking about the contribution of women in Mughal history. So we read those books, and eventually we managed to put together a nice performance piece. And then we did this walk, and it just was very well received, like exceptionally well received. And there was coverage by newspapers. Times of India did it, Hindustan Times did it. Then a lot of school students came. Then teachers came, specifically a group of history teachers from a couple of very well-known schools in Delhi. And the response was, अरे यार, हमें अगर ऐसे हिस्ट्री पढ़ाई होती तो one, we would have never resisted the history class which we used to for the longest time in our school days. Maybe we would have even ended up doing a bachelor's or a master's in history, or otherwise, to say the least, we would have never forgotten these particular stories, because once you see it being performed, so एक अलग तरीके से, these stories tend to stay with you over a period of time. So that was very encouraging. Ritu, just to share with you, initially, a lot of these walks, we had to actually put money from our own pockets, all three of us, to kind of run this project. So for us, it was more than anything else, it was sheer labor of love. It was not even about like, okay, paise kamane hain through this, it was because the scaling up ka effort to hum abhi bhi kar rahe hain at so many levels. But it was more like, as you're saying, na, ki, we saw certain gaps in the way stories are told about our city. या stories हैं, but वो बड़े स्केल पे या एक अच्छे वे में larger masses तक पहुंच नहीं रही है. So there is this gap. There are people who are really interested in stories, but there are stories to tell, but in between जो gap था, that is what I think we kind of stepped in as Darwesh Heritage Walks to kind of bridge that gap between the stories and the people who are very keen to hear those stories. And so that is why it kind of took off very well. Yeah.
While you're talking, I am sort of, imagining bunch of school teachers who are so excited about history more than what they learned in school, and now they want to even teach it better. So minds being ignited. And also, the beautiful thing that you said, there are stories. Not that there aren't any stories, but the gap that you fill is to take the stories to the people who want to listen to them, who care for those stories. Because after all, if stories are not told, are not shared, like the forgotten monuments, because the monuments are still there, they aren't ticketed, like you said, so there isn't enough footfall. If people don't visit them, if people just visit them to take pictures and spend some time in how monuments are abused in our cities, to be very honest, for encroachment or for other things. But then if the stories don't keep that monument alive, then the monument dies sooner than it is meant to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And in terms of, let's say, getting a consensus from, let's say, you mentioned that Red Fort was very heavily guarded, a lot of attention that it is getting. So was it an operational strategy to go to places which were ignored, forgotten, lesser known, to go to those places and unearth the stories and make them popular therefore? And the second thing is also to sort of, experiment with, let's say, content which people don't know about. So how do you bring people to those places that people have forgotten or they didn't even know that it existed? So how did you bridge the two things together?
You're absolutely right कि ये दोनों चीजें थी. There was this sort of deep-seated passion to unearth the lesser-known stories. And then at an operational level also, it was a strategy because bade monuments mein we just couldn't go and start performing. They wouldn't allow us at all unless there is a plan, a project from the top that they offer us, which happened later on. That did happen, luckily for us. But initially the idea was ke, okay, somebody comes to Delhi, what is on their radar as a tourist? Yeah, even Delhi walas. So it's like Qutub, Humayun, Red Fort, maybe Lotus Temple. Over the years, then Akshardham also got added to the list. But mota, these were the things. But then once we started looking at least the 7 capitals of Delhi, starting with Tomars and Chauhans and the Mamluks, going till, let's say, the British era, 1911, when the capital shifts from Calcutta to Delhi, we realized, looking at that map and then, doing our research, we realized that, arey, itne monuments hain, itne sare monuments hain, there are so many stories to be told. whether it is Jahanpana Fort built by Muhammad bin Tughlaq, or whether it is, as I said, Roshan Ara's Baridari, or Zinatul Nisa's Masjid in दरियागंज, या 1857 का पूरा ट्रेल है कश्मीरी गेट के पास, और लेट्स लुक एट Jamali Kamali Mosque and Tomb and the entire area around it of Mehrauli Archaeological Park, या Mehrauli village के अंदर, it's a hub of Sufism to begin with, because it's even before the time of Nizamuddin Aulia. It is of his predecessor Kutubuddin Bakhtiyar Kaki. So itni kahaniyan hai which people have no clue at all, and this I'm saying from my 10 years, 11 years of experience, because most of these places when we did the walks, people were like, हम दिल्ली में 30 साल से रह रहे हैं, 40 साल से रह रहे हैं, 50 साल से रह रहे हैं. We have no clue about these spaces, that they even existed. So for us, it was a win-win situation in both the ways. One, because it was easy to access these spaces and even do like a performative piece over there, after, of course, talking to the local guards or sometimes to the local ASI office, because anyhow we were not touching the monument or damaging or anything. We were not fiddling with the monument in any which way. We were just standing there and performing and moving around with our group of audience. And secondly, I think Yuvika from the very beginning, and later on, once I and Madhvi started, we started working, as a team together, three of us, we realized that yes, it is so important to tell the stories of these lesser known spaces and places. And so it really worked well for us, to the extent that once the government noticed us doing these walks in these lesser known spaces, performative walks, we were invited by Archaeological Survey of India to perform this performance piece, Daughters of Shah Jahan, at Diwan-e Khas in Red Fort during the World Heritage Week, and then at a later stage do our Tughlaq performance, Tughlaq, the Mad Genius, at Tughlaqabad Fort, because otherwise we used to do it at the lesser known space of Jahanpana Fort. So that was also a performance based heritage walk where I used to play the character of Muhammad bin Tughlaq. So yeah, it worked out well for us that ways, both ways.
Right. So I think, while you said that, getting noticed was also very important. Being appreciated for breaking away from the usual stories and telling forgotten stories was important. And you mentioned ASI, and you mentioned government officials wanting to curate those experiences. In your interaction with let's say powers above, did you see them appreciating the role of storytelling in celebrating heritage, or the intervention or the innovation that you brought to experiencing a monument? Did they come forth and tell you anything about, we want to do more of this, or do it for us, or things like that? But did they want to own this new idea, or did they encourage you, saying that do more? Did they bring in more players? Because I know by now in the city there are more people who do lots of walks, and a walk around the city is one of the most common things that people curate over weekends and at different times of the year. So we know that there's no IP to the idea of exploring the city through walks and through stories that it has to tell. But from, let's say, to institutionalize anything, to, let's say, create a space where there is funding, recognition, a validation for the fact that we are recognized by so and so for having done this, or for even the simple thing that you could be commissioned more work, that can you do something in this monument, or things like that. So did you see anything of that happening?
Because I think we came up with this idea. Initially, there was a lot of encouragement. Probably they saw value in it. So they invited us to do this. Although वो बहुत long term नहीं चला. It was the standalone events during the World Heritage Week.
Right.
But I do see that the government acknowledges this, because very recently, 2 years back, I was part of this 50 Heritage Walks program that was initiated by the Delhi Tourism Department. And so I, along with several other leading walk leaders from Delhi, we were invited to be a part of it and do our, heritage walks. We were given a free hand. We were told, okay, these are the locations. But within that, how do you want to conduct the walk? Whether you want to make it purely very academic and dates oriented, or you want to use your own performative elements and storytelling styles. That was, we were given a complete freedom in that, and they were very encouraging with regards to this idea. Then they came up with 100 Heritage Walks Festival. Then during in July 2024, Delhi was hosting the UNESCO World Heritage Meet. So there were some 2,000 plus delegates from all over the world who were visiting Delhi for these very high level meetings that they have with regards to, I think, finalizing some new sites which will be under the UNESCO World Heritage list. So India was the host. So invariably, because Delhi became the center of those high level meetings, so these delegates were given an opportunity to visit a lot of these historical sites early morning or late evening. And again, we walk leaders were invited by Government of India, this time by Ministry of Tourism and Delhi Tourism, who jointly hosted this program. And again, it was all about, we were given a free hand to share, to talk about the history of the place, the monument, but in our own, unique style. And I have personally received a lot of appreciation and encouragement from the government officials with regards to this format of storytelling, wherein we bring in a lot of performative element and try to generate interest, and also make it, as we were talking in the beginning, both about tangible and intangible, and making these cross-disciplinary connections. And sometimes, even going beyond the themes of monument.
Yeah.
As I think we were discussing before, whether it is river and the city, or Delhi's metamorphosis, or looking at the queer heritage sites and then talking about the larger concept of queer and queerness in our mythology, in our history, the way it was acknowledged and at times even celebrated in our culture. So they were even very encouraging of non-site specific heritage walks.
I think
so that was really nice.
I think that's part of your evolution as an organization, to walk away from the monument and say that what are the other themes that one can weave stories around. So how so I think that it sort of relates to that, the fact that you've innovated over a period of time and said that how can Darwesh stand apart, from, let's say, the regular other organizations which do heritage walks, and what unique themes can we sort of curate, right? That's come from there. Explain to us this paradigm of discover, design, embellish, perform, and how do you apply it to, let's say, any theme that you pick up? So for people who haven't been to any of your walks, people who are not from Delhi, or people who are sort of interested in exploring how does heritage storytelling work, how does one curate, and because this looks like a lot of hard work, to read a lot more than you can possibly even say at a venue during a show, but it shows the passion or the process behind it. So what is this paradigm? How do you apply it to design a walk? Give us an example.
So I came across this biography of Mrs. Indira Gandhi. So I went through it, and somehow there were these aspects about her life, especially as a woman, as a daughter, as a wife, as a mother, that really kind of appealed to me. At some level, at a very deep level, I kind of resonated with her challenges, her insecurities, and then eventually how it also impacted her politics. So then I read several of her biographies by several Indian and foreign authors, and eventually then I thought कि कहाँ पर Delhi में we can do probably a better on her life, and then I ended up visiting her memorial, which is One Sabdarjung, which was also where she stayed during her public life. and eventually was also assassinated there. So her house and her office are connected, one Akbar and one Safdarjung, and they've turned her house into a memorial. So, then for me, it became a very, very natural process of looking at her life and then eventually turning it into a heritage walk, come heritage better, where I talk very much in detail about, again, linking it back to our idea of telling women's history. So, we go a lot in detail about certain aspects of her life, which are not very, very prominent जब भी उनके बारे में कुछ टेलीविजन प्रोग्राम या उस तरीके की चीजें बनती हैं. So again, the lesser known aspects of her, and then how they impact her politics and the country at large. So this is one example. Another is Amrita Shergill. So her life and her artworks. So when I do this walk in National Gallery of Modern Art, which very fortunately holds a lot of her very iconic paintings, which were given by her husband, her late husband, and her late father as well, post her death, to Government of India. And so they've kept it, they are permanently on exhibition there. In fact, recently उनके ऊपर एक Hungarian और Indian government का joint project है जो NGMA में चल रहा है. And tomorrow again we are doing a walk on her life and her artworks. So again, looking at her was first as a woman. So I read her biography, and the stories itself made so much sense to me that then after reading about her life, I went and saw her artworks. Because personally speaking, I'm generally not very, very, I'm not a lot into looking at artworks. But it was the story of the person, the personality was so intriguing that eventually after reading about her, in great detail, I eventually ended up looking at her artworks, and then I tried to create connections and eventually started doing this heritage walk, which was specifically focused on this particular artist at the NGMA. तो ये हमारी कोशिश रहती है कि हमेशा it's either a personality or something to do with how that particular personality's decisions impacted the larger, socio-economic or socio-cultural aspects of the society during their time. So we always try to, merely personally as a storyteller, it's always the person first that pulls me. The person, the personality becomes the hook. And then eventually I enter into greater details about the person, the times, the socio-cultural aspects, which we then weave into something which will be again a very, very wholesome experience about not only the person but also the times. Because over the years I've experienced that maybe for you it could be that the personality is a hook as far as you're trying to tell the story. But when the audience come, some of them are more interested in that because of that person or that personality, what were the decisions that they took that then impacted whatever aspect, whether it was political, whether it was cultural, whether it was social. So वो बहुत interesting रहता है कि फिर as a storyteller आप सब चीजों को offer करते हो प्लेट पे, फिर ये आपके ऑडियंस पे है कि कौन किस चीज को उठाना चाहता है.
The Storied Way Perspective is designed and developed by Your Storybag Podcasting Network. Podcasting is a fantastic medium that brings listeners to gather around a story. As the podcasting industry grows by leaps and bounds, we at Your Storybag want to help storytellers, businesses, brands, and organizations leverage the power of narrative. We are not an agency. Instead, you can imagine us as a collective or a cohort that incubates and nurtures emerging story-based podcasts in the airwaves. If you'd like to collaborate, commission, or create your own story-based podcast, reach out to us at podcast@yourstorybag.com. taking very critical threads out of your description and your story. And stay with me for some time. थोड़ा सा time लगेगा इसको explain करने में. And I think that's where the power of storyteller, and the telling comes together. Because at the end of the day, storytellers have a very important role, which is to interpret a story, right? To go discover, find a story. Again, when you are reading history, whether you're reading a biography, you are reading somebody's version of a story of somebody's life, right? Unless it's an autobiography, right? If I've written my autobiography, then you hear it from me. But this is the way I tell my story. And when you're putting multiple sources to craft, to get to a story that you've understood, that you have a perspective on, you decide to shape it and then present it to an audience who come with their perspective also, whether with their ignorance or their bias or their prejudices or their little knowledge. Somewhere the storyteller plays a very vital and a significant role in bridging the many perspectives by saying that, okay, let's leave our prejudices or our biases or our, let's say, lack of information also outside, and then view it. Like you said, if you didn't understand art better, but because you read the story, you now appreciated the art. So therefore, that new lens that you're bringing to that experience. And then you mentioned something about doing a bed hug, which is a little different from a walk, because a walk is I go ignorant, I walk, I see, I take photographs, I listen, and then I walk out or I walk away, right? But a bed hug makes you sit down and listen and experience, and then perhaps even talk, because I've been to one of your bed hugs where you talk about partition and its impact on in the community and the culture of Delhi. And I remember us all sitting under a tree and looking at photographs and talking from our own perspective. So therefore, there is the slowing down of that storytelling experience, right? And I become a participant in that, and I have a dialogue, and I'm willingly participating in a discussion about a story and its impact. Like you said, when people listen, they make it about something else. So while you are describing that, what is the role of the listener, and what are the kind of listeners and audience that you come? Because I know you work with people from Delhi, like you said, 30 years I've lived in the city and I didn't know about this about my city. You know, people who are coming in as tourists, who are coming in just seasonally, maybe sometimes. You're working with children, you're working with parents, you're working with teachers. You know, this is such a fascinating mix of audience, right? How have you, how does your audience react to these stories? Are they willing to relearn, to relook at history, at culture, at themselves, their own heritage? What changes do you see in them? What curiosities do you see in your audience?
Over the years, I've seen audience का जो एक thought process है वो कई ways में change हुआ है. Also because social media के चलते WhatsApp पे जो messages आते हैं या जो अब Instagram पे इतना ज़्यादा है, reels, shorts, ये सब के चलते, what we've seen is that there are certain very strong narratives which are circulating all over. So we've seen कि उसका एक impact audience पे है.
Popular culture.
I mean, young.
So popular culture affecting.
Whether they are, yes. And whether it is a young audience or middle-aged or elderly, they all come with there's a rigid mindset.
Yeah.
Although I also see that a lot of people who come for the walks do come with some level of background already. They've read about it or they are interested in these themes, so they make that special effort of coming all the way over a weekend, because आना एक walk के लिए means you're spending at least good 5 hours आना जाना and then being in the walk, which is generally 2 to 2.5 hours की walk minimum होती है, and then your travel time. So we see that people who come are actually keen and interested, majority of them, if not all. So to counter at least अगर किसी का कोई fix या rigid mindset है, उसको थोड़ा सा counter also would not be the right word, but to make it a little more, to make them a little more open to the new ideas that we might be sharing, I always begin my walks these days by saying that, we today understand that especially history and conversations around history have become a very, strong political battlefield, actually, if you see it. And so our effort, or again, coming back to my personal why of doing these walks, is to just, not just to share stories with our audience, but also to try to pass on this idea that history is very, very layered, very nuanced, and that there are no easy heroes or villains as far as any aspect of history is concerned, And I think the biggest disservice that we do to history is कि हम आज के lens से we try to see what has happened hundreds of years back, and then try to judge these, whether they are political figures or historical figures. Why did they do this or why didn't they do that? Because it's very easy in hindsight to say ऐसे कर लिया होता, वैसे कर लिया होता. But sometimes these people were just being true to their times, So, so again, passing on this idea that it's very, very layered, very nuanced, and also that, just to keep an open mind to listen to these different stories that we are coming up with, because my own personal approach is very centrist. I'm neither bending to this side or that side. I keep a very centrist approach, if that is a correct word, but because I think it is my duty as a storyteller to keep it at least as much as humanly possible, thoda objective rakhna, unbiased rakhna. Although of course I'll have my own biases जो बड़े subconscious level पे मुझे दिखता भी है, कई बार दिख जाते हैं कि वो आ रहे हैं, because sometimes when you're sharing stories, people tend to question you back or try to assert their viewpoint, because as you rightly said, बैठक्स में it's also about allowing the audience, giving them that space to share their ideas or their experiences, which might or might not be in alignment with what I am sharing. But then at least giving them that space, that sort of listening, without saying कि नहीं ये सही है या गलत है. And just leaving that space open for each one of them to make their own sort of interpretations about the whole thing.
Right.
Have I answered your question fully, or were there other aspects?
No, you answered it. So what are the challenges or what are the, let's say, limitations, or what are the conditions that sort of guide you in designing a walk or a performance? Because now you're aware of your audience. You know that the storyteller is not completely at freedom, perhaps, to provoke the audience, but your effort is to sort of give them an experience which takes them to a place where they did not know something, and therefore now they are seeing it through your lens. But so what are the conditions that you work with while you are researching, while you're presenting a story? Are you constrained by your audience? Are you constrained by the times we live in? Are you constrained by the stories and how they can be misunderstood by people?
Yeah. आई थिंक एक बात जो मैंने अभी रिसेंटली अपने एक वॉक में कही, बिकॉज समवेयर आप जब स्टोरीज शेयर कर रहे होते हो तो जो फीडबैक आपको वॉक में मिलता है, उससे आपको समझ आ जाती है ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ टाइम उस चीज को करते करते कि अभी के जो टाइम्स हैं और जो नैरेटिव है उसमें कई चीजें जो हैं वो उसको थोड़ा सा एक पुश बैक भी मिलता है ऑडियंस से. बट बिकॉज एज अ स्टोरी टेलर आप कन्विंस्ड हो उस पर्टिकुलर इंटरप्रिटेशन से और आप उसको शेयर करना चाह रहे हो, सो समटाइम्स यू हैव टू एट द वेरी आउटसेट define where you are coming from. So I generally say that those who seek to redress the past also allow themselves to be enslaved by it. So with that, I said that I will that the walk is probably my or the stories are my interpretation of history in a certain way. Of course, depending upon the sources, authentic sources of history by leading historians of India and even international historians. But I'm sure that many of you might want to agree or disagree with what I'm saying. So I say that matlab walk ke baad samne hi there's a coffee shop, so we can always go and sit there and probably have a heated discussion also on certain things. You need not agree with what all I'm saying, but yeah. So we kind of leave it at that, and then we continue with our story. But yes, you're right. I think limitations जो रहते हैं, they are more in terms of the time and the space. उस sense में logistical limitations जरूर रहते हैं, because you have to hold on to the audience attention, which because of several reasons is now very very short. बच्चों की तो short होती है. Even I think that with adults also it is becoming extremely short. And when you're in such a space where there are so many people, it's noisy. So you have to keep your stories very engrossing. You have to continuously even play with the aspects of the way you speak and the way you present. So voice modulation aap kaise kar rahe hain. Then I try to bring in a lot of poetry, because sometimes I feel that कवियों का काम है कि गागर में सागर उड़ेल देते हैं. तो कई बार जो आप बातें नहीं कह पाते, through poetry you can probably really
make it better.
Yeah, exactly. जो आपने point कहना है, you might have experienced it in the partition walk. That I use a lot of Urdu and Punjabi poetry in that walk. So वो एकदम it brings home the point in a very precise and a hard-hitting manner. So wo I use a lot to kind of hold on to the attention of the audience. There are certain walks which also allow me to even probably play around with music, or like singing, which I really enjoy. So I bring in Sufi kalam in my Sufi walks, a little bit of singing to bring home the point through again through music. So वो कोशिश रहती है कि कैसे आप अलग अलग टेक्निकल एस्पेक्ट्स के साथ खेल सकते हो, या where are you standing, where are you making your audience stand or sit, how can you use the monument to your benefit. Like there is a walk that I am working on the urban villages of Delhi, which are kind of, I think, dying at a very fast pace, especially because of boutiquification, as you can see in Shahpur Jat, as you can see in Hoska's village, and also because of very rapid unplanned urbanization in Chirag, Delhi, I've seen. So there I try to stand at places where you can actually see the juxtaposition of the old and the new. So यहाँ monument है, और बगल में बिल्कुल साथ में you have these unplanned sort of these buildings जो कि बिल्कुल आपको दिखता भी है कि एक बड़े unnatural way में, क्योंकि I think वो लाल डोरा areas हैं, तो वहाँ पे बहुत ज्यादा बिल्डिंग बायलॉज को लेके दे आर प्रॉब्ली नॉट वेरी स्ट्रिक्ट. तो वो बिल्कुल ऑलमोस्ट मॉन्यूमेंट के अंदर घुसे चले आ रहे हैं, या इतनी प्रॉक्सिमिटी में लोग रह रहे हैं कि मॉन्यूमेंट के अंदर, क्योंकि ये लेसर नोन नॉन टिकटेड मॉन्यूमेंट है, तो उसके अंदर कचरा, गंदगी, छोटे बच्चे जो है वहीं पे क्रिकेट खेल रहे हैं. तो वो एज अ पर्सन हु इज कमिंग टू डू दिस वॉक, उनको मैं जान के ऐसे स्पेसेस में लेके जाती हूँ, वेयर यू कैन एक्चुअली सी कि हाउ द न्यू इज काइंड ऑफ लिटरली ईटिंग इनटू द ओल्ड, एंड ओल्ड व्हिच नीड्स टू बी literally taking it over, and the old that needs to be preserved, because it is our past. ये है हमारी धरोहर है, और इसको बचाना जरूरी है, irrespective of the fact कि of course we are one of the most populated cities in the world. There is a shortage of space. We need to house more and more people. But despite all those realities, एक ये reality भी है कि इन spaces को बचाना जरूरी है. तो वो कैसे, they are literally taking them over, and whether just because of the sheer number of people or also because of the commercial interest. As you can see in Oscar's Village, as you can see in Shahpur Jat, even in Lado Sarai, such urban villages, where there is, andar jayenge, so you'll find there's so much of history lying around unattended, encroached upon, damaged, vandalized by the city. And we are just turning a deaf ear to all these things. So the walk is also a way of, nudging the people to kind of wake up to these realities, and then to show this sort of juxtaposition of the old and the new not in a very glamorized light. Oh ho, dekho. Because a lot of it is purely about taking over and finishing the heritage sites and taking over for vested commercial interests more than anything else.
Does that make people care? We are wiping our heritage, our past. Who cares for the heritage in the past? Because this commercialization is important, this capitalism is important, owning every bit of space that nobody cares for. This was a rundown ruins, and look at this, now we've created something out of it which is benefiting so many people, generating X amount of money, giving livelihoods, or whatever, however you look at it, right? Do you think people, by telling them this story of modern day destruction or the obliteration of, or the wiping out of our history and our past and our heritage and the stories, that people have become so inconsequential that people don't care for those stories anymore? Is that making a difference? Will it make a difference? Are people looking at their past and their present and the future any differently thanks to the storytelling that you're doing?
I think there has been thoda. Yeah. But it only happens when somebody at a very higher level in the machinery, in the government machinery, wakes up to it. So I think the whole idea of doing these heritage walks is probably एक तरीके से mass level पर अगर एक सहमति बनती है, so maybe people can nudge the ones who are sitting at the top level. Or who knows, maybe somebody sitting at the top level notices these heritage walks happening, these spaces being explored, sees some sort of both, I would say, is genuinely concerned, but also sees some kind of economic potential in it. So then they come up with some interesting ideas to enliven that dormant urban space, probably clean it up, manage it well, and then probably कुछ commercial वो वहाँ पे कर सकते हैं, as long as that helps to keep the building in good shape, clean, and at least, in a condition that it survives for, let's say, another few 100 years down the line.
Yeah. There's a reason why it survived till now, because nobody sees an economical benefit or an earning capacity out of that. That's why it's in the ruins. It's too troublesome to sort of spend money. Not that there isn't money, perhaps there is money. It's too troublesome to spend money and look after it, than to let it be ruined or just broken down or taken over and do something in its place. While listening to you and particularly the decay of heritage, if I can say that, it's a problematic term and a phrase to use, the decay or a dying of our heritage, while it's being celebrated somewhere, while we are celebrating UNESCO's new UNESCO sites being added and India being a host to an event like this, India having its own UNESCO heritage sites, and there are the parallel, decaying, dying, obliterated spaces. Somewhere heritage is like our environment, our ecology, like where there is this whole mass conversation on saving the environment, looking after it, to creating eco warriors. Does heritage need heritage warriors too, who will step forward? And because you work with children, a lot of times I know there is this guilt which children or children are gifted when we take them to talking about climate change and environment, and we say that we have to change it and the change has to come from you. Similarly, when children see this heritage site dilapidating or sort of being forgotten or being shown in a new light, and we say that it's up to you to protect our heritage, we own it. In my son's school, celebrating the heritage is one of their core values. So therefore, we know that there is a lot of focus being on the next generation. So how do children respond to, let's say, the forgotten part of history or the unknown part of history, or their role in participating with heritage in a more active way? Is there hope? Is there something that you've been able to do, because you work a lot with children and progressive schools which are doing its own part? So while there is a, you know, there is this whole movement to save the environment, do you think through your storytelling, through your work, particularly with young children, there could be a parallel movement to save and celebrate our heritage so that more people talk about it? You know, we know, even the government knows, when you send a message to the children, people suddenly awaken and take note of it. You think that's possible?
Uh, I think mindset ke level pe there has been change in the sense that schools are willing to engage with the themes of heritage. They are more willing to make those interdisciplinary connections, because there's a school that was teaching a particular unit in the school in history. So they came to us to do the walk. The students were studying the things related to that particular aspect in their class. Plus, I got a call from one of the drama teachers working in that school. Ke, can you share stories about this particular historical character and space, because we will also be working in the drama and education aspect with that particular unit. So I saw those connections being made, and I realized that the school is making an effort to really work with this particular theme and help the children kind of make sense of it, taking that effort to bring them to the historical site and then engaging with us, and not just randomly, just the teachers are talking about it. They wanted experts to engage the students in these themes, and then they asked us also give them some post-walk assignments to think about, to engage with that topic in a more detailed way, because आपका walk तो 3 घंटे का होगा, लेकिन उसके बाद क्या होगा? So we really want to leave the children with that theme, in a deeper way, so that it stays with them and they engage with it at different levels. So there I see effort is being made. But if I try to see how is that translating in a particular lesser known site, which is already in danger of, going off the map of Delhi, maybe in another 100 years or so, because the condition is so bad, there I see a gap.
Yeah.
So I don't know if schools can really come up with some plans where they get these petitions signed by children and sent to the government, or they literally adopt a monument.
I was just going to suggest that.
And yes, either financially invest in its upkeep or involve their students to. Now there's so much social media which the students are using, so they can go and visit the space, make reels, talk about the condition. Probably जब इतना massive level पर content बनेगा, so maybe the government would also notice, or even if the government doesn't notice, maybe some news channels will notice that these students are constantly coming to this site, engaging with it, probably cleaning it, or engaging with the community around it. Because a lot of times I've seen that the people who are living in the closest proximity to the monument are not really aware of the stories, the history. Maybe they know the name, इसकी है, इसकी मज़ार है, इसका ये है, वो है. But then a lot of other interesting stories to it. So there's a sense of indifference, apathy towards the structure. And it is more seen like, यार, हट जाए यहाँ से, या how can we encroach upon this space, वो ज़्यादा सोच रहती है, rather than a sense of connect and a sense of ownership with these historical spaces. So वो अगर किसी, I mean that gap is there कि आपने देखा, students ने उसके साथ engage किया, but action के level पे क्या आप कर सकते हो that आपका engagement actually helps the city and helps that structure to survive and to flourish.
Absolutely.
कि आप कुछ ऐसे इंटरेस्टिंग आइडियाज के साथ आ सकते हो कि उसमें कुछ ऐसा एस्पेक्ट इंट्रोड्यूस करें जिससे एक रेवेन्यू जनरेशन हो फॉर इट्स अपकीप. I mean, there's so much potential because we've seen these examples in pockets.
Yeah.
We've seen the examples in pockets, and somehow I feel that a comprehensive approach चाहिए. Whenever we are looking at heritage, we cannot look at it in isolation because ये जो पूरा museumize करने का जो एक approach है, which was probably a colonial style when they were building Delhi in post 1911. They were looking at a lot of these historical sites as picturesque backgrounds to the city with no real relationship with the life of the city. So ये museumize करना और isolate करना heritage को वो work नहीं करेगा. If you really want to do something in terms of conservation, so building कोई conservation के साथ साथ you will have to work with the communities around it.
They have to
It has to be a very comprehensive. Yeah.
People have to care. People have to care.
And people will care only once they also see some kind of benefit to them from the monument.
Yeah.
तो वो कहीं ना कहीं bridging those gaps, those economic जो revenue generation के तरीके हैं उनको पूरा एक plan के तहत जोड़ के और working with the women, working with the children in the community, vocational training, and somehow it has to be comprehensive. This is something we've also seen with regard to Aga Khan Trust for Culture's work in and around Humayun's tomb and Nizamuddin and Sundar Nursery, because they've taken a very, very comprehensive approach.
Yeah.
And they've given us a model.
Yeah.
Now we can pick up that model and replicate it. So why can't schools pick it up and invest some money and the potential of their students?
Even for that matter,
schemes.
Even organizations can, as part of their CSR, to come forward and sort of preserve the culture and adopt a heritage site and sort of look after it so that it's meaningful to them as well, part of their CSR work. I think we should make it mandatory.
Absolutely.
While I'm talking to you right now, Nitika, I'm also talking with a large hotel group, and part of my work with them will be to enable them to tell stories of culture in their city, because they want their employees to have conversations and meaningful conversations with their employees in this, with their guests. When their guests are there in the hotel, they can have a conversation about the culture, the heritage, the sites to visit, and tell them stories. So they are trying to turn their employees into heritage storytellers or cultural storytellers who can have conversations. So I think there is a great potential to get there. While we're talking, I can see the struggle in your work. I can see why it is a tough task to not just unearth the stories, but also to make the stories count, to make the stories relevant, to make the stories impactful for the audience that you're working with, and also to not just benefit you yourself monetarily, to make it a sustainable career and a bankable, let's say, model of operation. But at the same time, also to lead it towards giving back to the heritage that is enabling you to tell stories with it. How difficult or challenging is sustenance or sustainability for Darwesh? Number one, what kind of partnership, collaborations, funding, donation, or let's say monetary support would help you scale up your work and take it and really make it count in the community that you're working with?
So far, our sustenance model has been doing a lot of private walks. So I collaborate with a lot of companies and I also do my own private walks. So that keeps us going. Because I think the weekend walks are more of showcasing our work.
Yeah.
They are more about that. Showcasing, because I keep coming up with new curated experiences. So that becomes a way of reaching out to the audience. And through them, sometimes we get, these private walks and otherwise on our own also through our channels. Because weekend walks are still largely a labor of love. The money comes in from private walks. Yeah. But I still remember some 8-9 years back, we were actually thinking of reaching out to a couple of organizations to see if there is a possibility of linking our heritage storytelling with community development projects, especially in and around these lesser known spaces, because we were very, very concerned about the lesser known non-ticketed monuments. One, they were of course in a sad state. A lot of them were kind of going into dilapidation as we were watching them, because we saw people coming there, children playing cricket and other games, and so the कभी जालियां टूट रही हैं बारादरी की, कभी कुछ डैमेज हो रहा है. Broad daylight में you would see people coming and not only vandalizing the structure but also making it dirty, or hiding in the nooks and crannies and smoking up or drinking in broad daylight. So there was this kind of sheer indifference and apathy. We thought that if something can be, but we were not, so far haven't really been able to scale that up, that idea. उसका scaling up नहीं हो पाया है. It is still more of our own private initiatives that we have undertaken to kind of spread awareness, and sometimes we do these free, of course, heritage walks with the local children who are staying in the vicinity or the community members. कि आपको कुछ पे नहीं करना है, बट आप आइए, सुनिए, एंगेज करिए, ताकि आपको स्टोरीज आप ही के कनेक्शंस एक तरीके से रीफॉर्म हो सके उस स्पेस के साथ. वो because I know that once we've engaged with some elderly people in and around Kotla Firozshah or Begumpur, and they told us that we were born inside the Begumpur mosque. It was post 1927 that ASI vacated us along with our families so that they could undertake the conservation of the space. And then we were made to move out, and then फिर ये पूरा इलाका एक तरीके से it sort of came up post 1927. So they have those vague connections with the structure, but the next generation, nahin, kuch nahi hai. For them, it is just some historical space. And in fact, once they see people also coming, they used to laugh at us. क्या करने आए हो आप यहाँ? यहाँ क्या है? लाल किला जाओ, कुतुब मीनार जाओ, यहाँ क्या पड़ा है? And then we would tell them कि ये stories हैं, so they would be really surprised. So we've done these very small initiatives at our own level, but we are quite open to engaging with, if somebody can come up with some bigger plans, then we can definitely try and see where do we fit in that larger project of comprehensive community development as a part of the larger heritage conservation plan.
So there's a lot that storytelling can do and change in the world. And for anyone listening to this podcast and listening to Nitika share the journey so far or the potential of it to impact lives and communities, this is where it starts. What next, Nitika? What plans? In what way can you make heritage more, let's say, accessible to people? Not just your work, in fact, because the way you're describing your work, the stories that you have to tell. While I agree, being in that location, listening to you live, in person, experiencing is a beautiful, experience for an audience. But there is an audience who's not listening to you, who can't perhaps come to you as often as they would like to, or for whatever reason. But your stories are there; they should reach out to people. So, are you thinking books? Are you thinking content? Are you thinking social media, YouTube? Are you thinking podcast? What else? How can you take your stories to more people who are waiting, who appreciate these stories and want to listen to them?
So I now constantly engage with a lot of content creation for our YouTube channel and also our Instagram, which Ritu, I would request you that once you put up this podcast, do share that in the description.
I will.
These details of the channels, both Instagram and YouTube, so that people can reach out and look up at our content. So I am now focusing a lot on going to these spaces a lot of spaces where we haven't really done walks as such, but we go there and we make a lot of content for Instagram and YouTube. Longer ones, of course, for YouTube, and shorter because of whatever attention span for Instagram. And we keep posting it regularly on our channels so that even if you cannot join us, and now there's a lot of curiosity even among the Indian diaspora sitting all over the world in Delhi's history and heritage and our culture as a whole. And so we keep sharing it over there so that people can access it, students can access it, because a lot of times they are like, Abhi, we are not earning, so we don't want to spend coming on the walks, so for them also it becomes a very, very economically, what should I say, viable way of looking at the city and the stories and engaging with it. They sometimes even then reach out to us for ideas, or sometimes they invite us for like podcasts, or sometimes they invite us to their schools or institutions. Recently I did a sort of a 1 hour orientation about our work, and specifically Delhi's history and heritage, with a management students institute. So they keep looking at our work and then they invite us. So then it's either they are coming to you or you are going to them, or you're reaching through social media. So that is something that now we are seeing a lot of value in that. So now we are very actively getting into content creation.
That's good. While you were talking, I sort of recalled that I worked with an organization that had a tie-up with, safari guides. This is, wildlife safari guides in South Africa. And the safari guide would do virtual safaris for people. So you're sitting in India through a Zoom, you're connected to the safari guide, and the safari guide is taking you around in the open to show you animals, their habitat, and tell you something about it. My role in that project was to come in and weave stories. So if you see a giraffe, but it was not to, the guide would take you up, tell you about facts and habitat, and the let's say the survival of the giraffe in its natural habitat, what are the conditions that lead to it, and things like that. And my role was to bring in stories to make people understand why and how giraffes have survived, and whether it's a story from mythology or a stories from ecology, to talk about how they are impacting the environment. And we were doing this as two people, one the safari guide in South Africa, me in a classroom in India. And a part of it was, it's like a virtual performance while the safari guide is telling her bit, then she pauses, and while she drives to the next bit, that acts as a backdrop for me to take my story ahead, and while you were talking, and I realized that is perfectly possible for something like you do. You're virtual, you can connect with audiences, of course, the internet, and having the right equipment, and having the right kind of people to live stream your walk and make it as engaging to an audience sitting somewhere else, so that they can experience it, or even an live versus something which is pre-recorded to talk about it, and because of the time zones and things like that. I think that's immensely possible, and I would really love you to explore that. Great work, Nitika. It's such a pleasure to talk to you and listen to your journey so far. It is a lot of hard work, and it's a lot of love for heritage, for stories which people forget. And thanks to people like you, these stories are being counted as stories which make us and experience our city. Again, wishing you on World Heritage Day. This is a wonderful, beautiful day to sort of have this conversation. And I'm so glad that you shared so openly about your work.
Thank you, Ritu. Once again, thanks for this brilliant platform of podcasts. And you also have been an inspiration in so many ways, because through Yuvika, I got introduced to you also, and we've seen each other's work over the years. And also, like, being women, that sense of sisterhood is always there. And I think it's part of that you're making this effort to reach out, and then you schedule this podcast. And I feel that We are really grateful to you for this platform, because through this we'll be able to reach out to a much wider audience.
Absolutely. Not
and
just
if we-
that. I don't think I give the platform. You are doing the hard work. I am not. This is just a way to sort of gather evidence that stories can impact the world. That's what it's coming from. That, stories matter. The storytellers matter. What we can do with storytelling in our community, in our world, is possible. Yes, we need certain tools. We need the story to reach the right ear, or the right numbers of years, so that somebody will stir up and sit up and say that this matters and we can take decisions, or we can change the course of our history, our heritage, and preserve it, or celebrate it for that matter, and do our bit in preserving these stories. So I think you're doing a very important work. What this podcast does is that to gather that evidence and say that, look, here it's happening, it can happen elsewhere, they need support, we can make it into a mass movement. And at the end of the day, like the way you are serving heritage, I'm serving storytelling and saying that, see, it matters in every uh, corner of our world. If you apply storytelling, lots of change can happen, and that you have given the evidence. I haven't. I have just brought those stories out from you. So the bells and the whistles are, and the perfetti are all for you, not for me.
Thank you so much. And I would just like to close this with this particular ये शेर है गालिब का, कि एक रोज अपनी रूह से पूछा कि दिल्ली क्या है. गालिब कहते हैं कि एक रोज अपनी रूह से पूछा कि दिल्ली क्या है, तो यूं जवाब में कह गई, ये दुनिया मानो जिस्म है और दिल्ली उसकी जान. So yeah,
Beautiful.
to Delhi and its stories.
Yes. Lovely. What a beautiful close to the episode. Thank you so much, Nitika. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ritu.
Hi, this is Rituparna. Thank you for listening to the Storied Way Perspective. This is a bi-monthly podcast where you will meet storytellers, influencers, entrepreneurs, coaches, thought leaders, and experts as I ask them, what can stories do in the world today? You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, and everywhere else. Look out for the Storied Way Perspective with Rituparna. No matter where you listen to us, please rate, review, and share the podcast. This helps me know you are listening. You can also write to me at podcast@yourstorybag.com. I will wait to hear from you.